Hello and welcome to the Alberta Water Council Source Water Protection Workshop. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alec, a project manager with Alberta Water Council and project manager for the Source Water Protection Project. Today I'll be moderating the workshop and later will help facilitate a feedback session. So we have 4 objectives today: to receive background information on source water protection and why it's important, to receive an overview of the Healthy River Ecosystem Assessment System, or the THREATS tool, a tool that can assist with source water protection planning, to hear about some source water related challenges from a representative from the town of Spirit River and how threats can be used to help understand and address some of the challenges that they're facing, and for the audience to participate in or observe as you'd like a demonstration of some of the functions of the threats tool and to provide feedback on your brief experience with it today. A quick round of introductions to the various presenters of today's session in order of appearance. We'll start off with Steph Neufeld, representing the Alberta Lake Management Society on the Source Water Protection Project team. She is a watershed manager with EPCOR and a co-chair of the Source Water Protection team and a board member of the Alberta Water Council. So she'll give some background today on source water protection and about our project team. We'll also have Trevor Boston, who is an associate and software development lead with Greenland, with over 25 years of technical project management experience. Trevor oversees research, development, and implementation related to Greenland's software platform initiatives. Today, he'll give a quick overview of threats, some of the analysis done in the threats tool for the case study, and lead the demonstration of the tool. And then Steve Jack, who is the Chief Administrative Officer with the town of Spirit River. He's graciously volunteered his time to develop a case study and join us today to walk through some of the water-related challenges their community is experiencing. So thank you, of course, to Jack for volunteering, and we're very grateful that you could help us out.
So this source water protection team was really started with the idea that source water protection is critical, and we wanted to reduce barriers to communities to implement it. And so when we think about source water protection, we're thinking about the idea that the final piece of protection for human health is the water treatment plant and the distribution system, but we can put other barriers to contaminants or pathogens upstream of that water treatment plant. And that's going to reduce the risk of any sort of disease or contaminant getting through to a human who's going to consume it. So this whole source water protection approach is looking upstream. And you can see here on this chart, there's a bunch of different things you look at. Things you may not normally associate with water treatment, like land cover, water quality, water quantity, flooding, different risks that can happen upstream of the water treatment plant and in fact affect the water quality of that plant. So doing this, however, is a different skill set than operating a water treatment plant. And some municipalities or utilities have someone who's dedicated to it, like Steph Neufeld at EPCOR. And what we've done is we've worked with Trevor on using this threats model, which is essentially one step in the source water protection process, and it goes and collates this information and brings it along. So we'll talk a bit about that. Next slide, please. When you start to think about this source water protection plan, you have some very simple components that you're going to need to look at. And this is pretty standard. There are different guides out there. And yeah, so you're going to start, of course, with your vision. What do you want to do? And then you're going to have to go through characterization of your source water. And essentially, that is understanding your area upstream of the source water intake. So at your water treatment plant, you're looking upstream. Then you're going to set goals, and then you're going to have an action plan, right? So how are you going to achieve those goals? And then you're going to implement it. And of course, it's an adaptive management approach. So after you've started to implement things, you will go back, evaluate, revise, and do the cycle again. Next slide, please. So the Alberta Water Council has done a lot of work on source water protection planning, as have the provincial and federal governments. And so there are different guides out there, and drawing on that, there has been a lot of information that has been pulled together and shared. And you can look at some of these ones are the Protecting Sources of Drinking Water in Alberta, and there's this guide. they're going to give you what you're seeing on the right here, a very standard, understandable graphic of what we do with source water protection. And although the concept is quite simple, it's that implementation that's tricky. And so when we were looking at this, we're also trying to figure out where are those situations or which components of this cycle is where it breaks down. So the previous work done on this has suggested, I guess we need a few mutes.
Adam, you're muted.
Yeah, Adam, you got muted there somehow. We haven't heard your last sort of 20 seconds.
Thank you. You're right. Someone did mute me. Okay, last 20 seconds. So anyhow, go back. I think I was talking about probably this diagram here, right? And we we're just trying to identify components of this process where it breaks down and source water protection planning doesn't achieve its end. So one of the things identified was the timely access to data. And if you're a small municipality or utility, it's difficult to find this. Likewise, understanding that data once you have it can be a challenge. So this tool is really trying to address that point of identifying that data, collating it, and starting to understand it. Next slide, please. There we go. So the project team came up with some goals for this project that the Alberta Water Council has put together. And it was essentially to develop a web tool and educational resources, really to provide support, to encourage municipalities and utilities to go ahead and do this. So the idea is that we could come alongside and provide support and encourage them to move forward on this. Assist water providers in doing risk assessment, encourage collaboration, integration. We understand that even with a tool, a municipality or a community or a utility may not be able to do this, but we could connect them with people who can do this. And finally, we want to develop some implementation recommendations, how to move this forward for Alberta and source water protection planning. Next slide, please. Okay, so the project team was made up of a bunch of different people. You can see listed here from different sectors, including provincial government, WPACs, GOA, Alberta Health, Forestry, large urban, small urban, lake, environment conservation, and rural. All those people have put in quite a bit of time on this, and that work has been much appreciated. Next slide, please. So, this team first met in April 2021 and started scoping out the concept of this and what it might look like, went through a lot of review and assessment of different possible tools and developing our own and working with existing GOA tools, and finally found this Greenland tool threats as being the most useful and appropriate for what we were hoping to do. So went about securing funding and got a contract with them and started working with them. The development is almost complete. Today, you get to be part of sort of that final step. We're going to run it. We're going to trial it with people who haven't been involved in its development. And we want your feedback on, does it work? Does it make sense? If you're not familiar with this, is it useful? So those are going to be questions we're asking for you. And we really are really interested in hearing back from you on this, because those of us who spend all our days thinking about this, it's sometimes difficult to get outside of that and understand what it's like for someone who does, 99 out of 100 days doing something else and then still has to think about source water protection. And we're really trying to make it easier and facilitate this sort of work for communities who can't do it otherwise. Our upcoming steps are to simply update the tool based on the feedback today, and then we'll have a final project. We'll release everything and get this tool out there to be used. So, next slide, please. Yes, we hand it over to Trevor at this point.
Okay, so navigating our threats interface. So threats is a web-based system. So hopefully in advance of this workshop, some of you might have had a chance to take a look and sign up for an account and explore around a little bit in the interface. But I'm going to go through a few slides that will show you some of the highlights of what we've got to offer in our system here. Okay, so when you arrive at our landing page, this is the first thing you're going to see. This is going to give you an opportunity to create a user account. So the next time you come back, it's easy to sign in, and some of the items that you worked on previously get retained within our system. So set up a user account, and when you're doing that, you want to select the Alberta Water Council as your region of interest. That's going to give you tools and geographic area on your mapping that is relevant to you for the purpose of this pilot project. In addition to that, on our landing page, we've got some other items of interest. There's some credits. You can view some of our previous funders and contributors to the project and the development of the tools. You can see a list of modules and some details about those features and financial contributors as well. So the main interface, when you log in, it's going to look like this. You have we built this dashboard here. So the dashboard is intended to provide a bit of guidance and overview. And we've also created a few links here as well to help you in navigating your source water protection plan development. So as you'll see in a minute, there's some tables here that will help you link some of the different risk factors with some of the data that we've got in the system. So you can always come back to this dashboard by going up to the tools menu, and you'll see a dashboard as one of the items, and it will bring you back to this area. In addition to the tools menu, which has the different modules, there's also a map library button. And if you press that, it will allow you to turn layers on and off, just like in a GIS type environment. Not sure my slide is not advancing here. There we go. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's some tables involved you can use as a reference. So these tables will provide some of the hazard areas and risks. There's a risk factor statement that talks a little bit about what does that mean, and then we've indicated some of the layers and data sets and threats that you can use to address that particular risk factor. So we'll start with the water quality module. This is what it looks like. The value of this, so threats uses an API from DataStream. DataStream has become an aggregator. They're run by the Gordon Foundation. It's a great initiative. They're an aggregator of water quality data across Canada. And they have an API that our system uses to access that data from across Canada. So once you're in our system, we can filter the data and you can sort of dig down into the data that you're looking for in your particular geographic area. We've taken some of the input from some of our stakeholders and tried to make this a bit more usable so that you can get to what you're looking for more quickly. We've done things like adding the top 20 and 50 chemicals that are most common in the database, so that things that are measured most frequently are the things that you see on that list, and you don't have to scroll through all 200 or 300 different organic chemicals and things with names you've never heard of. All right, I'm going to run through a couple of short videos. Essentially what this is going to do is allow me to sort of provide a demonstration, and without having to do the demonstrating, I can talk over top of this while it's running. So this is the first part of that is going to look at setting up this filter. So when you log in here, you're going to see all these red dots. Those are the water quality stations all across Alberta. And let's suppose you just want to look for one chemical like chloride. So the first time you run the filter, in this little demo, it's going to show you all the stations that have chloride. Now we're going to draw a little area of interest box with our polygon around an area of interest. And we're going to run that filter again, and it's going to get rid of everything else. So you're just looking at a focus area. Now let's suppose you only want to see stations with 50 or more samples. So you put in 50, and now you can put in a date range you're interested in. And it's going to filter all that down, so you're only seeing the stations that have the data you're interested in. So that's the first little demonstration. So now that you've got your chemicals of interest sort of filtered down, now we're going to set up the analysis. So I'm going to press pause here for a quick second to give a little more information on this. So this little filter button here is useful if because you've got a collection of stations here. You filtered it initially for chloride, and by clicking this common to all locations, by default, you should hope that all of these stations have got chloride. But let's suppose you switched the chemical after your initial analysis and you want to look at something else. If you click this common to all, it's going to update the number of the stations that are available, so that some of the stations, or if you selected a number of stations first and you want to see stations or chemicals that are common to all of those stations, you can use this button. If you use the available to any button, you're going to see all of the chemicals that are available to your selected stations, but not all of those stations have that chemical. So when you run your analysis, it may remove some of the stations where that chemical is not available. There's this top 20 and 50 chemicals I mentioned a bit earlier that are designed to give you just access to the chemicals that are most commonly in the database. And then this chemicals for filter stations is kind of a linkage between this initial map filtering. So it limits the number of stations you're going to see to make it a bit easier. So this video is just going to run through this quick. So here we're going to select a chemical, and then your stations. So we have these fractions here. Lots of chemicals come with different fractions. So it's important to, if there's more than one, you have to select the ones that are relevant. Make sure that you get all the data. There's lots of instances in this data set where there's different chemical fractions that are sort of the same thing. So that's always something that'll have to be taken into account. The system is pretty good at helping you find data, but it does assume that you've got a certain level of understanding. All right, I'm going to go on to the next one. So this is once you've got a couple of stations identified. There's some different things that we can do with those. You can group them together. Let's pause on that for a second. So let's suppose you've got a water course and you've got 3 or 4 stations. They've been operated at different times. They're fairly close proximity to each other, and they've got some common chemicals, but because they're from different data collectors, maybe they didn't realize there was a station there before. And so with this tool, you can group them together so that one station or multiple stations in close proximity become one station for the purpose of analysis. That can be quite useful, especially as you'll see in a few minutes here when we get into the flux analysis, and you have to have a minimum number of data points for it to work properly. So here, as you can see, it's grouped those points together, and we can we can generate a graph from those together. All right, so the next one, we have a tool in here that allows us to add guidelines. So we've got a couple of different types of guidelines available. We've got CCME guidelines, the Canadian Council of Ministers of the Environment. We've also got guidelines that were taken from the North Saskatchewan Water Quality Framework at the 3 different locations on the North Saskatchewan River. So there's a couple of choices, and if you're working in the North Saskatchewan, those are available for you. We're going to explore this information a little bit. This is the CCME website. You can see a list of chemicals that are included in their guidelines, and you can see the actual sort of behind the scenes data, if you will, that gets used in our system to generate those guidelines. And essentially what happens is it's going to superimpose those lines over top of the chart. So here we've got chronic and acute toxicity lines. There's also trend lines there, or best fit lines, as well as the data points. Okay, and then the final video I'm going to do here. So this is our flux module. What this does is it allows you to combine hydrometric station data and water quality data together, and generate a load or a flux, if you will. This is useful because most water quality data is only taken on a infrequent basis. And in order to do long-term analysis of trends, it's useful to be able to kind of fill in those gaps. So this is a tool that allows you to use regression analysis to develop that flux or that relationship between the continuous hydrometric station data and the not continuous water quality data. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're taking the Rosedale water intake as the point of analysis. We're looking for lead as our chemical of interest. Lead has a few different fractions, so we're going to pick the total. Now we hit submit. All right, so there's the first chart. It's a typical scatter chart. We've got a few different things we can play with here. We can look at a log chart or linear. There's method detection. We've got a few different options for that, whether you want to use half the method detection limit or remove all of those that are under the method detection limit, or assume that the limit is the actual concentration. We have box plots as well. Takes a couple of seconds for egrets or the flux analysis tool to generate the suite of charts, because it's actually generating quite a few different charts. And you can download that data. There's a little additional menu box that pops up above the charts, and one of the options you got in there is to download this data into a CSV table. And that allows you pretty much unlimited flexibility in how you analyze that data if you want to do something beyond what's available. So this is a list of the available charts. And in a moment, I'm going to flip back to my slide deck here, and I'll give a bit of an overview of each of those. Okay, so this is a bit of an egrets tool. So egrets, this is a USGS R package that we've implemented on the back end in our platform. So instead of you having to be able to use R, and find their library package and install it and all of its dependent libraries. We've got it set up in threads so that you can easily run through that just by indicating what data sets you want to use. All right, so this is a list of the different plots that egrets will analysis will do for you. I'm going to run through each of them and give you a bit of a brief description on what each one does. So this is the estimated daily load. So as I mentioned a minute ago, your water quality samples are infrequent and your hydrology data is more continuous, so it uses a regression to estimate. So the orange line here shows you the continuous data series, and then these points are the actual measured concentrations. And then we can do this for both in kilograms per day of loading and an estimated concentration. These can be aggregated by year. So these points again are your calculated estimated load, and then this line here is kind of a trend line. It's got a number of different features in it that allow you to compare how well the regression generated flux compares against your measured data. So these box plots give you a bit of an idea between the estimate and the measured data. Water quality module. So also this module also gives you the ability to look at residuals, and you've got some of these typical plots that show kind of the estimate against the measured data, so you can see how well it matches up. So ideal conditions would be that all of your estimates would exactly align on this diagonal line here against your measured data. This is another tool we've got in here. This is a trend analysis tool, seasonal trend decomposition using Lois. So what this tool attempts to do is to kind of filter out seasonal trends. So these are things that that tend to cycle by season or by month. So when you look at water quality data, it's usually pretty noisy data. It's not easy to see trends. So this tool helps you to kind of take out some of that cyclical occurrence, and then you get left with kind of a residual or a trend or another line, I guess, if you will, that's had that other cyclical data filtered out, so you can see whether there's any other underlying trends within your data. And this is kind of this is the residual, I guess, after. So it decomposes it into 3 different sets of data. Another tool we have is the Mann-Kendall trend analysis. This allows for you're essentially looking at the change in signal or the slope of change over time. So this again is using our lead example, where we're looking to see whether the overall flux of lead is increasing, decreasing, or over time. So it's showing that the mean is increasing a bit. There's not really a whole lot of change in the minimum or maximum. And then this part of the chart shows you which months that trend is most evident in. All right, I'm going to move on to our spatial analysis module. This is kind of, I call it GIS light, if you will. It does some simple analysis on spatial data. It allows you to clip one area of interest or a data set with an area of interest that's been specified. It works for points, lines, and polygons. It provides, so once you've identified your area of interest, it'll show you the number of features within that area of interest. So whether it's polygons or pieces of polygons, points or lengths of lines, and then it helps you calculate the density of those features within your area of interest. So you can see, oh, there's 200 oil wells, or there's 200 kilometers of road segment or rail segment or whatever within your area of interest. And that can be part of your source water protection plan to understand what types of and to quantify those types of features within your upstream watershed. So just a few screenshots from the system and a few things that I can point out. So this is the result of an analysis on was done in this catchment area. So this is a custom catchment area, I believe. I'll show you in a minute. There's a tool in the hydrometric station analysis tool that will allow you to delineate a catchment. Once you've got a catchment delineated, you can bring it into this spatial analysis module. And yeah, so this tool allows you to look at the density of these areas. So each of the years where there were fires, so this is a number of polygons. So for 1947, I guess there were 7 polygons that represent different areas of fire. The sum of those areas, so this tells you how many square kilometers within your area of interest. And obviously some of these polygons have space within your area of interest and outside of your area. And then this tells you kind of the density. So one divided, or this area divided by your total area of interest area. And then we can generate some charts like this pie chart below, which tells you what percentage of your area experienced fires and in which year. And then maybe there's another slide that shows the second pie chart, which will tell you of the areas that were burnt, what percentage happened in each year. Seem to be having a little bit of technical difficulty here. There we go. All right. So we've got another data set. This is the Census of Agriculture. So 2 periods. We've got the 2016 census and the 2021 census. This is what we call a bit of a special case because the table is a little bit different for this data. So unlike most of the data sets and threats, spatial data, the shape or the geometry is really the data itself. Like it's the number of points, the length of lines, the area of polygons. That's what you're looking for, whether if it's a wildfire area or a well site or a length of railway. The geometry of that data is really kind of key. Yeah, so there's, as I was mentioning, there's 2 special cases for our spatial analysis, the Census of Agriculture. So what you'll see in a minute here, there's ways that we can use the filtering to add spatial data sets and then filter according to the fields that we're interested in. So this Census of Agriculture is one, and the second one is the National Pollutant Release Inventory. That's the next slide. Okay, so the same sort of thing. This has point data, but each of these points has a lot of information related to it. So this will tell you the name of the factory or the industry associated with the particular release. So Canadian laws require that any release of contaminants, controlled substances have to be reported. And when the report goes in, the data goes into this database. So that'll include the spatial location of the release, the name of the facility, company involved, the chemical involved, how much of it was released, what units of measurement, what procedures were used to measure it, and so on. So there's a lot of information in this data set. It'll tell you historical releases. I think our data goes up to, I'd have to check and see. We updated it not too long ago, but this data only gets updated and made available periodically, or maybe every year or two. So, but it's a pretty good record of what's available. So when you're setting up the query or the filtering for this, you're probably going to be interested in the substance name, the name of the facility. We can group it according to whether the release was to air or water to soil. So yeah, some really good information in that database. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a YouTube video. It's going to walk you through how to set up this module and provide a couple of quick examples. This is an older video that we prepared a couple of years ago, but for the most part, I think this is all still relevant. And I'll kind of walk through a little bit about what's going on. So as mentioned, this allows you to collect and merge the data, analyze the spatial data, and it spans all of our area of interest. So this is some preliminary stuff. Okay, so this is kind of a different way of explaining what I was saying about geometric analysis, where you've got lines, polygons, and points. Anybody has any questions, we can probably take a couple of questions through the board there as well. So selecting your area of interest is the first step. So in this case, this is a catchment area, North Saskatchewan. And we're evaluating land use. Well, this is an example using the Census of Agriculture. So dissecting the columns, so the map layer of interest, the area of interest, and all of the ratios that we calculated earlier. So this slide talks a little bit about how that data is aggregated. So in reality, it's not homogeneous, but the way Threat sees it is it assumes that it's homogeneous. So when you're doing spatial weighting, you're going to get a bit of an estimate. It's not going to be perfect. You might have for example, a hog facility that's going to be in one location, and maybe you've got 10, 1,000 pigs in your watershed, but it thinks that they're all distributed evenly, but in fact, they're all in one location. So there's obviously some potential for error when you're making that kind of assumption that the user needs to be aware of how the calculation is being done. And using a delineated area of watershed interest, you can select multiple catchment areas if that's how you want to set up your analysis. And once you've delineated these in the hydrometric analysis tool, they become available to the spatial analysis module. We've got connectivity between these modules, so you can do some of your work in one and flip to another module. It's almost like they're tabs. So when you're finished using one analysis, you can flip to another, do some work there, and then flip back and forth. This little example shows how you can add a mask to your area of interest. This is useful if you're preparing reports and you want to take a screenshot of a map area that sort of allows you to focus in on that area of interest. You can also add multiple data layers at the same time and apply filters to them. So when you're adding filters, you get things like, you know, the wellhead count. So this is a particular field. And in this example, they were looking to see, show me where there's more than a certain number. It's worth pointing out all these little question marks that you'll see on the screen help you find more information. They've got little tips and things that can help you navigate the system better. There's also the about. You'll see that at the top of each module that gives you a more detailed description on what's happening in each of the modules. Okay, Alec, you can move on to the next one there. Okay. So the last module we'll talk about is the hydrometric stations analysis module. Okay, next. Okay, so here you come into the module from the tools menu. You've got the option to set up a new or delineate a custom catchment. You can do that by clicking the new point. Once you do that, you can either use the click function or snap function, and it'll essentially lock your point to the nearest drainage path or drainage line, or you can go without the snap and it will delineate to the exact point that you've identified. Your other option is to use hydrometric stations. So we've got data stations or hydrometric stations from Water Survey Canada, and we've also got some from that are operated by the Alberta government. So once you do that, you've selected your area, your hydrometric station, or you've delineated, then you've got your catchment area. And the next thing you can do is to start doing an analysis. So you've got a bunch of different options here when you go down to the hydrologic charts. And this is the list of charts that are available. So Alec, next slide there. So we've got hydrographs. So this is charts, daily recorded station data. That's pretty basic. We've got stacked hydrographs. So this allows you to put two different charts. There's two different chart types, but it allows you to stack hydrometric station data on top of each other. This is useful when you want to see how much water is being contributed from different tributaries on a water course. We've got a predicted flood events. This is a statistical analysis that looks at historical data to see what the return period flows look like. So a 1 in 100 year flow, 1 in a 50 year flow, and you can compare current flows or against those conditions. There's monthly and annual box plots. There's a Mann-Kendall trend analysis, and there's also yeah. So okay, next slide. So this is kind of a mashup of examples from this module. On the far left, we've got we use a Pearson 3 distribution to calculate 7Q or 20 through 7Q2 return period low flow events. So this is a run. So what this does is it's a 7-day running average of flows, and then it determines the return period of that 7-day lowest flow condition in a 2 through 20 year return period. So this is helpful for, we use it a lot for doing assimilative capacity studies where you're discharging treated effluent into a receiving water course. Here in Ontario, we use the 7Q20 as the low flow design condition that's used to simulate or do that mixing analysis. So that's one use of that. But there's lots of other potential uses for it. The center chart, this is a Mann-Kendall trend analysis looking at flow. So it's identifying months where the flow condition is trending downward and the strength or signal strength of that trend in this particular hydrograph. The top right is that high flow frequency return period conditions. So this shows you different return periods and what the flow condition is. And then you've got your time series data below that, so you can see where it exceeds that. I think this is the Calgary flooding in 2013. So you can see it exceeded the 1 in 100 year condition there. And then the last one on the bottom right is a cumulative frequency chart. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I think that wraps things up. We can move
There's
on
a
to the
couple
next.
questions in the chat.
Okay.
So one of the questions for you, Trevor, does this capture treated effluent releases? Are those included? And it looks like there's an answer below. There are different media types in the data stream allowed values, and it seems like it's not included in that list from Nathan.
Yeah, we don't have treated effluent unless unless the operator were to to upload that data into data stream. Typically, it's mostly surface water that's being measured and reported in data stream, but it's possible that they might. It depends on how. I mean, whoever contributes the data can sort of identify what the media is that's being sampled, so it's not impossible. But to my knowledge, I haven't seen any treatment plants that are reporting their data on this system.
Okay. The next question, how granular can this information be considered? For example, municipal land use planning will identify setbacks as sensitive areas around water bodies. Is it possible to address the cumulative impacts of pollutants on these subbasins at the catchment level? Adam says yes. Trevor, do you have anything to add?
I'm not sure I entirely understand the question. This is about the resolution of the data or about...
Catherine, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, thanks. It is about the resolution of the data. So, and not just that, but focus on that information right around a subbasin. So you were kind of showing that we could capture primary basin, but I'm wondering, can you get around a lake basin, and how does that hydrology show in ephemeral streams? So I kind of elaborated in the second question as well. So is the current provincial mapping doesn't show ephemeral streams or the major hydrology, and I'm guessing that this picks up on that, but I was looking for
okay. I think I know what you're getting at. So yeah, all right. So there's the hydrometric station data, which is that those catchments are immediately available. So you can automatically add those. If you want to do your own custom catchment area, then it's as simple as dropping a point on the map, and our algorithm will use a digital elevation map in the background. It uses the Alberta 24-meter DEM, and we've pre-calculated all the flow directions. So it'll generate a catchment wherever you want a catchment generated. It'll also produce a flow trace from that point going downstream. In fact, I find it useful to do both. Like if you've got a particular area, oftentimes it's if it's a little bit off of a drainage area, you might end up, or a drainage flow path, you might end up with a 1 or 2 pixel catchment area. But you can use the drainage line to figure out better understand where those drainage lines are, and then drop your next point right on the drainage line, and then calculate your catchment backwards from that, which can be quite a helpful little trick to get it to give you what you're looking for. But it should be able to give you a pretty good resolution in terms of catchments that you're looking for.
That's great. This is just an amazing tool. I think that one of the things that I find is that municipalities they will set a setback around a water body and have that as a goal in their land use planning, but then they face pressures from development and gravel extraction or whatever it is, oil and gas, and the pressure is pretty significant, and they just don't have these kinds of tools to be able to look at their specific area and consider the hydrological implications, and the visual tool that's where those calculations have already been made in the background is just going to be so valuable for our municipalities. I appreciate the work that you've done.
Excellent. Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
I have a question about, so you've been talking about the 1 in 100 year flood, and appreciate that you've also gone to more frequent flooding, because we do see that in certain areas. Ecoregions are more vulnerable to more frequent flooding, as we've seen. I'm assuming ecoregions are calculated into that as well. Is that correct? Is that how you base your flood mapping?
No, those calculations of return period flows are based strictly on the hydrometric station data itself. So for any given station, we take the history of that, and we go back and look at calculate the return period frequency based on a distribution, and that comes directly from the flow data. It doesn't consider any other data.
I see. I think there can be some limitations to that, because when we're looking at our hydrometric stations, we know we have some gaps
Okay.
in the basins, and the fact that some of our tributaries are not measured to the same extent. I think
Right. Yeah.
some of that will be limiting.
That is definitely a limitation. There is something we're working on. We haven't released it with this at this time, but we've been working with use of machine learning techniques to try to fill some gaps in existing hydrometric stations. So if you look at the map of stations across Canada, historically there have been many more than are currently in operation today. And we're looking at some techniques that would allow us to fill in gaps and maybe even sort of, in theory, bring some of them back to life with at least synthetic data. Anyways, it might be able to help with some of that, but we haven't released that yet, but it's something we're working on.
Oh, exciting. Thanks so much.
Okay. Great, thanks. All right, so yeah, we did a little side analysis after talking with Steve. We wanted to try to quantify some of the conditions and things that they're seeing in their watershed using threats. So as you can see in this slide here, we ran a delineation. So I dropped a couple of points. The first time I tried to delineate, I didn't quite catch the area, so I dropped a point up the first one to the upper left there, because I knew that was in the watershed in the catchment area somewhere. So that once I dropped that point, it gave me this drainage line downstream, and then I dropped the second point kind of in on the right side there at the lower right, and that I knew that everything, because that's right on their reservoir. So then that being on the flow line, it was able to capture the upstream catchment area. So that's the first step in using threats for most things, because most of you are going to be working on a watershed type geographic area. Okay, so next, so that's the tributary that they're pulling from. So in this image, you can see the upper catchment is the one I delineated. The lower catchment below that, there's actually a hydrometric station on the Spirit River, just upstream of where their tributary joins the Spirit River. So you can see that although they don't have any flow station on their tributary, you get a bit of a sense of proportional. The size of their tributary area versus the upstream catchment area for the Spirit River at that location. So next slide. Where is it? Okay, so if we look at the hydrometric station for that on the Spirit River, it's a pretty intermittent flow. They get spiked in flow in the spring each year, but there doesn't look like there's a real. There might be some base flow there, but otherwise it's pretty intermittent. So as I mentioned, this tributary area for this hydrometric station is probably about 4 times the size of the town's tributary source. So you can get a sense that the tributary they're drawing from is going to have roughly maybe a quarter of what you're measuring in the Spirit River gauge station. So I did a little low flow analysis on this using our return period low flow analysis. So you can see what those flows look like on a regular basis there. So yeah, okay. So that would be a tool that, oh, sorry, no, this is not the Spirit River. This is the Peace River. I was going to say those flows look way too big. Yeah, this is the station that's highlighted there in yellow. We did the low flow analysis there. Okay, next slide. All right, so then we use the spatial analysis module. As Steve mentioned, there's a lot of agricultural activity in this watershed. So we looked at a few different things that might impact water quality in the reservoir or quantity. So we looked at cultivated areas, active petroleum wells, mines, pipelines, groundwater wells. So we identified that there's a large cultivated area. So this analysis will essentially quantify what Steve indicated in his, but now we've got some numbers in terms of proportion. So we also were able to see what some of that activity looks like. Next slide. So yeah, I hovered over some of that Census of Agriculture data. Let's see here. Okay, I guess this is just about applying the mask. Okay, next slide. Okay, so yeah, we did some analysis on cultivated areas. We found some of the different agricultural uses in the area. We added pipelines, we added mining areas and wells just to quantify those. Okay. And then, so from looking at that data, we can see there's quite a few cattle. It's fairly small to see, but I think we focused on the cattle. You can see the populations, and we did some analysis to figure out the density and what that might look like. Okay, all right, next. This is a land use layer. So we ran, there's data from 2000 and 2010, and we ran both of them just to see if there's any significant changes in land use cover. So our charts didn't show anything significantly different. Next slide. We looked at historic pipeline releases. We just noticed there were a couple of smaller releases in the area, so that may not be an issue in this particular case, but it's something worth investigating if your water source happens to be in proximity to a recent or a longer historical releases of petroleum. Next slide. Okay, so there was a question to Steve about water quality, and we tried to look at water quality for this catchment, but unfortunately there's not a lot of, well, there wasn't any data that we could, that we had access to showing up in threats. So this kind of highlights the importance of making that data available. Data Stream is a really great platform for getting data, into a system and managed, because they've got a database. It's not sitting on a spreadsheet on somebody's personal computer or whatever. It's not on a, it's very easy for really valuable water quality data to get misplaced and lost when people change jobs, and it gets lost on different computers and servers and things. But having a centralized system to maintain that data in perpetuity is really valuable, because water quality is important to be able to see a history of it, not just the current state. So we encourage anybody who's got access to data, who's collecting data or has historical data, to try to get into Data Stream and make it available so that this system can provide more insights when there's more data in it. Next slide. Other resources, we've got a tool in our system that allows you to access a number of different data sources. We're always sort of trying to balance between, do we add this functionality into threats, or do we help people find data and tools that are already out there that are developed by others? We're not really big on reinventing wheels, so we've made a few additional links available.
Thanks to our project funders, Alberta Innovates. They provided us with $200,000 in funding to complete the software development. So of course, this project wouldn't have been possible without their contribution. And the Alberta government, GOA, specifically Environment and Protected Areas, provides us with ongoing operational funding and covered all the other aspects of the project. So thanks to them. A couple of acknowledgements. Adam, I guess you weren't supposed to speak, but thanks for stepping in and talking today. He was pretty instrumental in getting this set up. The Source Water Protection Project team for all their hard work over the last few years to get us to this point. Our presenters, Adam, Trevor, Steve, and then of course all of you for participating and providing feedback today, and any online viewers that we might have in the future. So thank you to everybody. Any final questions, comments, concerns? Okay, perfect. That's it. Thank you for joining us, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.